Look, I have never looked forward to a Teach conference as much as I have this year. Look, we had those speakers before us, the breaking news, but really, it's because of you, the educators in this room, the educators of our nation. It has been a tough year. I don't know if there's ever been one that's been more challenging. Yet you, and I want you to hear this, you make a difference in students' lives no matter what. You build your students' confidence to think independently and with creativity. You help each student realize their potential. You create community in our classrooms, our schools, our neighborhoods. You are our nation's future makers. Yes. Okay, you could clap for yourselves. It is only in a room of teachers and other educators that I have to remind you to clap for yourself. Because you do all of this as you deal with everything from budget cuts to culture wars, with class sizes that are way too high and salaries that are way too low, and amid such divisiveness right now. And you've done this while officials whose job it is to support teaching and learning make your jobs harder. And even our ability to make our classrooms welcoming spaces has gotten harder. I think about, and I know we'll show this, I think about these signs, the "Everyone is welcome here," you see it up here? I bet a whole bunch of you have this sign in your classroom. So there was the teacher in Idaho who was ordered to remove this sign that she had in her classroom for years, the "Everyone is welcome here" sign with all the hands. She was told by her administration this year that this was a political opinion, not a sacrosanct responsibility. Can you imagine that reassuring children that they are in a safe, welcoming space is now an act of insubordination? Being an educator will be even more challenging next year. And yes, it's great that we just got that great breaking news. But it's going to be more challenging next year because of the law that President Trump and Republicans call big and beautiful. Yes, that is a great reaction to it. Because think about what Trump thinks as big and beautiful. It's big, but it's anything but beautiful, and it will have devastating effects on all of us. But think particularly about how it betrays the very people who voted for Trump, hoping he would deliver on the better life he promised. And so I'm just taking a couple of seconds to talk about what's in this bill, what he thinks is beautiful. Taking food from children in need, ripping health care away from millions of Americans, eliminating good jobs in clean energy and manufacturing, defunding public education and making it harder for low-income students to afford college, making Americans sicker, hungrier, and poorer, and adding trillions to the deficit. And for what? For what? Tax cuts for the very, very rich. So, yeah, President Trump delivered all right, just not for working folks. Do wealthy people need more tax breaks? Here's an idea. How about a working class tax cut instead? Think about what this bill will mean for your classrooms. Children coming to school with even more needs and fewer resources to support them. And despite all of this, despite everything that has happened this year, despite this new bill, despite everything that's thrown at you, you're still inspiring. You still prod our kids, push them to be the best they can be. You provide love and support because you are the future makers. You are the nation builders. So that's why, for me, being in this community, seeing all of you, you give me great hope. So, and sorry about my voice. So I want to talk about, for the rest of the speech, how we fight back and how we fight for a better life as educators, as workers, trade unionists, and as Americans, and why we must be beacons for our communities as never before. Because we are in a moment like never before. This government is attacking the foundations of our humanity: healthcare, food security, education, research to cure deadly diseases, Social Security that keeps the elderly and the vulnerable out of destitution, masked agents. Let me take a little water here. I have been having cough drops all day, but thank you. You just don't want me to have it and then spit it out. Mass agents are disappearing people. Yes, you just heard Kent, disappearing them. People just trying to do an honest day's work. And we're not talking about hardened criminals. Even our students aren't safe, like the high school student arrested by ICE on his way to volleyball practice, or the teen who was detained as he headed to a school field trip. So many Americans are anxious and struggling to get by. So we need an agenda of affordability, opportunity, and dignity, and a pathway to a better life for everyone. Yet, President Trump, he's making life harder for everyone. Sorry, with one exception, the billionaires who bankrolled his campaign and are now enjoying a return on their investment. Think about the president's trade war. It's making everyday goods more expensive, and it's crushing small businesses. And the war on workers? Stripping collective bargaining from more than 1 million federal workers. This is what he's doing, what President Trump is doing. He's pursuing an agenda of chaos, corruption, and cruelty, and of contempt for what we do as educators. There is a war on knowledge, on teaching the truth, on your autonomy, on pluralism, and you, and not just our members, NEA members and teachers across this country are on the front lines. But as every historian in this room will tell you, and every historian we read will tell us, this is what autocrats do. They've done it throughout history, and they do it in the world today. Vladimir Putin has said, wars are won by teachers. It's a grudging acknowledgement of the importance of our profession, and it's an unveiled threat. Now, no one is surprised that Putin, like other authoritarians, has purged schools and universities of non-loyalists and has had curricula and textbooks rewritten to whitewash past and present wrongs. But we should be alarmed and outraged that we are seeing authoritarian tactics here in America. Educators and schools from pre-K to higher education are under attack. for teaching American history, for promoting excellence and equity, for valuing freedom of thought, and for protecting all children's right to learn free from fear, and for seeing all of God's children for the precious souls they are. Why? Why this relentless attack on public schools and teachers? The perpetrators of these attacks fear what we do. They fear the teaching of reading and of reason. They fear the teaching of critical thinking. They fear the teaching of honest history and of pluralism, because their brand of greed and power and privilege cannot survive in a democracy of diverse, educated citizens. And that's why this moment, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I thought about it ever since Chris Rufo said that to get to universal vouchers, you have to create universal public school distrust. So that's why this moment compelled me to write a book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. And I warn in it about the dangers of this attack on knowledge and pluralism, and I spell out the ways we can fight back to defend critical thinking, to defend opportunity, and to defend democracy. Because we know that the route to the American dream goes through our public schools. That public schools are the embodiment of America's civic values and democratic ideals, that all young people should have opportunities to prepare for life, for college, for career, and for citizenship. And in a pluralistic society, people with different beliefs and backgrounds, they have to learn to bridge differences and to work together. That happens in our public schools. And as the founders advocated, educated citizens are essential to protect our democracy from demagogues. But at this moment, public education is at a precipice. Donald Trump and his allies don't just want to abolish the Department of Education, they are laying waste to public education. They're gutting funding for key personnel and programs so public schools can't function properly. And they are also waging a full-scale assault on higher education, attacking both autonomy and affordability. And we are engaged in a full-scale fight back. Think about America's colleges. America's colleges and universities are incubators of innovation and discovery. They are both the envy of the world and are indispensable to the communities in which they're located. And recent polling just this week demonstrates that young people really want them to be accessible and affordable. But evidently, people in power right now don't see it that way. Remember what Trump and Education Secretary Linda McMahon did this year with that Dear Colleague letter. They tried to pull federal funding, Title I and IDEA in particular, from schools where they thought there was a whiff of equity, diversity, or inclusion. Our lawsuit stopped that. Now, I was going to say a few hours ago that Trump and McMahon are illegally withholding more than $7 billion in K-12 funds that was to start next week, funding that Congress authorized and that schools obligated. But today, they backed down. And just let me say, a whole lot of you were lobbying on the Hill yesterday. So, our lobbying, our lawsuits, we had several of our state federations take this lawsuit. Our advocacy for why these funds matter to kids. It all worked. But we're not stopping. We stood with Senators Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey this week as they, many of you were there, as they introduced their bills calling for fair pay for teachers and school staff. Because no one should have to endure poverty to serve in the profession that makes all other professions possible. So I want to just say again, thank you to those of you who lobbied Congress yesterday. But it's also not just Trump and McMahon. The majority on the Supreme Court has allowed Trump to proceed with these mass firings at the Department of Education. We stopped it for a long time. And he's setting in place his plans to dismantle the department. Now, they did it on something called a shadow docket. But Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, understood, yeah, we should clap for her. She understood, she said in her dissent, that this would unleash untold harm for students. And she warned that this action of trampling on Congress is a grave threat to the Constitution's separation of powers. But as Senator Hirono just said, Trump and his congressional majority have now gone for the jugular. Because this big, ugly tax law, sorry, I'm calling it the big, ugly betrayal. It includes a nationwide voucher program. Evelyn talked about it before. But this is what it does. It's an unprecedented and uncapped tax credit that will hurt students in public schools, and get this, could cost taxpayers more than $50 billion a year, which is nearly double what the federal government now spends on helping poor kids and kids with disabilities. They are literally taking money away from our most vulnerable students for a tax credit for the rich to use on vouchers. I don't know how much more evidence you need, but this administration has abandoned students in public schools. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and George Washington championed public education as a public good. And as imperfect as they are, public schools are where we create opportunity and community for all, not just some. So let me ask you, are we going to let the likes of Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, Linda McMahon, and the architects of Project 2025 end public education as we know it? No! Let me hear that again. No! And not just this room, but people are with us. Americans support public schools, and they want them strengthened, not defunded or dismantled. The majority disapprove of the president's agenda, his economic agenda, his education agenda, now even his immigration agenda. There's a movement growing by the day saying this is not us. We don't want these cuts, this chaos, this cruelty. None of this is helping working people have a better life. 5 million people, including many of you in this room, took to the streets for the No Kings protests in one of the largest demonstrations in American history. Because, as if you go to the training on MOVE, if you've heard me at all in the last few months, being on the streets, standing up for our values is the most effective way to reverse this slide towards authoritarianism. So, what more do we do as educators and as unionists? First, we continue to be who we are as future makers, educating and nurturing our students so all children can achieve their dreams. The work you do is the most important work in our society. But we can't just close our classroom doors and hope what is happening on the outside never makes its way inside. We have to fight back against these attacks on our students, on our schools, and our way of life. And I know sometimes that's really scary. And at the same time, we must imagine a bold vision for our public schools and a better life for working people and fight for it. Fight for it at the bargaining table and on the streets. Fight for it at the local school board and at the State House. Fight for it here in Washington and at the ballot box. Fight for a better future that gives people hope, builds connection, and overcomes the authoritarian threat we face. A future that people can see, they can feel, and that they believe is possible. So, I want to focus on that for a few minutes. I thought long and hard about, particularly for all of you who are doing the poll of how long my speech is, I thought long and hard about, how to combine two things that we had to do at the same time. I did tell one person how long it was. But I want to focus, but I'm not telling you who I told. I want to focus on what that vision looks like for our public schools. And it boils down to 4 words: safe, welcoming, relevant, and engaging. These words represent what parents want for their children, and frankly, what I've heard from all of you about wanting for our students. And you've told me this is what I love about our members: you are not shy. You told me this in my visits to classrooms and to schools and to communities across the country. And it's a vision we can build on in every community, red, blue, or purple. So first, we know from brain science that safe and welcoming schools aren't just a good idea for kids' well-being, they're essential to success in school. People can't learn when they are hungry or stressed out. Schools must be places where students and families and educators are safe, supported, and accepted. Yet we know that too many students do not feel safe, whether because of loneliness, anxiety, depression, gun violence, immigration status, or countless other reasons. That's why you do, I've seen it, everything in our power to create safe and welcoming spaces. And one way the AFT does it is promoting community schools. They are, for those of you who don't know, a research-backed way we serve all students, particularly the most vulnerable, by bringing services and activities they and their families need under one roof. Community schools can be open all day and offer after-school and evening recreational activities and homework assistance. They can offer childcare and medical care and other services the communities need, like English language instruction, like GED programs, or even legal assistance. The common thread is that they help students and families learn and thrive. But President Trump's budget zeroes out funding for community schools. And current grantees, they're having their grants reviewed for any trace of addressing social-emotional learning, trauma, or equity, which, of course, is a gotcha because the proposals were required to include those components. Exactly. Look, I have to address the elephant in the room, which is hate. Whether it's racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, or anti-Semitism, hate has no place in our schools. And hear me out. We must do everything we can to ensure that the Palestinian student or the Jewish teacher or the parent from another country feels safe and welcome in our schools, no matter what is happening in the world. And we can't let other forces which want to deny the existence of discrimination in some quarters act to weaponize it in others. So, creating safe and welcoming environments, it ensures that students are ready to learn. It creates an environment that says our schools are our community. But students also need a well-rounded education that develops important skills and exposes them to a wide range of ideas and knowledge, and obviously prepares them for college, career, and life. And that's where relevant and engaging comes in. So let's start in the earliest years. In education, the basics are a big thing. And what's more fundamental than reading? Reading and writing and oral communication, they're essential skills students need in school, as citizens, and in the world of work. And we know, you all know this, when students become strong readers when they are young, they are more likely to be successful later in life. And that's why, as many of you have done with us, the AFT gives out books. We've given out more than 10 million books so far, many. And as long as we got the money, we keep on doing it. Many at community events across the country through our partnership with First Book. Yes, and then there's the how-tos of teaching reading. Because for a quarter of a century, the AFT has been advocating for evidence-based reading instruction and putting professional development, publications, and partnerships behind it. That's in some ways how the Teach Conference started. This year, we added training for teachers to strengthen the vital family-school connection with workshops and tools to promote reading at home, whether it's through read-alouds and everyday conversations for young readers, or questions to spark engagement and deepen understanding in the teen years. And our affiliates in Minnesota and Ohio and Texas are already running with this strategy. Yes. And this year, we've added 2 courses on dyslexia. Something people have asked for and need. A 3-hour grounding in key signs of dyslexia and practical tools to help kids read, and a multi-day deep dive into the full range of instructional strategies. But speaking about teaching stuff, everybody always wants me to use better pedagogical phrases, but for me, it's about teaching stuff. Sorry. I hear from members over and over again that they need a place where they can find it, when they need it, and what they need. So give me what I need, when I need it, right now. Does that sound familiar? So we got 2. We have AFT's ever-growing Share My Lesson, which houses all of our literacy resources and will soon have a hub for parents and community. And we're proud to partner with WETA, that's right, public broadcasting, on Reading Universe, which we announced 2 years ago, and it has become a one-stop shop on teaching reading right. And in less than 2 years, Reading Universe has grown to more than 40,000 unique visitors every month, and it gets bigger and better every day. And coming soon is a series for paraprofessionals on the science of reading that is being piloted by AFT members. So, I often say that joy is important. So is play. Play is proven to support, yes, play is important. Play is proven to support cognitive development, and it helps kids with skills like cooperation, empathy, and even conflict resolution. It supports the kind of engagement we know kids need. And that's why recess is so important. Who wants the ball? As kids get older, both curriculum and engagement get more challenging. And just like I've been a broken record on community schools, I am even more of a broken record on project-based instruction. Because project-based instruction and experiential learning helps students learn how to solve problems, how to analyze and synthesize data, and how to apply learning to new situations, knowledge and skills people need whatever they do in life. And for those of you who have led us into your schools and your classrooms, you know that high-quality career and tech education is an incredible model of experiential learning. And 95% of students who concentrate in CTE graduate from high school, and 70% go to college. So, before she was education secretary, Linda McMahon claimed to be a big proponent of CTE. But she seems too busy cutting services for kids, sending student loan borrowers to debt collectors, and attacking trans kids. So we're not going to wait for Linda McMahon or for anybody else to push for these transformational programs. We're working to expand CTE to more students, partnering with more employers, community colleges, unions, and others to prepare students for potential careers in healthcare, information technology, advanced manufacturing, and traditional trades. 3 examples since our last Teach conference. 1, we worked with CareerWise to launch the Education and Apprenticeship Accelerator, a groundbreaking partnership that dramatically expands apprenticeship opportunities for youth across the United States. 2, the AFT, UFT, and NYSET have partnered with Micron on an advanced technology framework to help high school students hone the foundational skills, yep, they are in the room, necessary for career success in the booming semiconductor industry. And 3, we are about to announce a partnership with the World Economic Forum to create a curriculum that will lead to good jobs and solid careers in U.S. manufacturing. And remember what I said before, this is not an either-or, this is a both-and, college and career. The goal of education should be to cultivate the skills necessary to succeed in our rapidly changing world, not to create good test takers. And that will require our education system to move beyond the stifling accountability models that narrow what teachers can teach, that condemn kids to low-quality, high-stakes standardized tests and excessive test prep, and that do nothing to improve learning. I want the people from outside the room to hear me. I'm not proposing less rigor. To the contrary, all students need a rich and challenging education that lets them learn by doing. Assessment should allow students to demonstrate their skills and knowledge, including through performance-based tasks like essays, oral presentations, building of models, podcasts, film, or other demonstrations. But that's all too rare, because for the last 25 years, since No Child Left Behind, standardized tests are too often, and the scores are too often, the be-all and the end-all. So, the strategies we're advocating, focusing on reading, wrapping services around schools, project-based instruction, these are not shiny new objects. They're just good ideas that help kids succeed. and they need to be scaled and resourced. So, Mr. Trump, hear me out. If you really believed that local school districts and states should be in charge of education, as frankly they have always been, then maybe you and Linda McMahon should spend some time listening to educators who are always focused on what helps kids. So, while these solutions may not be new, the distractions caused by these devices are. Yes, it's my cover, but you can see it's my device. We are facing a crisis of engagement in our schools, a crisis that's compounded by screens and social media. And we're competing for students' attention against intentionally addictive algorithms designed to distract young users. I was supposed to have all 3 books here. I'm into books today, as you can see. As professor and author of The Anxious Generation, and by the way, he's going to do one of our book clubs at the end of August. So, as Jonathan Haidt says, cell phones and social media are making our kids sedentary, solitary, anxious, and depressed. Now, you heard Melinda before, because states like New York have led, with our union leading, on combating this through a bell-to-bell ban on phones in schools to ensure that students are present and engaged and that teachers can teach rather than being the phone police. Yes, we should. Look, Cleveland did this last year. New York is trying this now. Yes, Cleveland's in the house. But speaking of technology, artificial intelligence has and will alter our world in ways we can't imagine. Maybe you can, but I can't. There are legitimate concerns about AI, or A1, as the secretary calls it. Remember, joy is an act of political and spiritual resistance. But even the Pope, in one of his first public remarks, spoke about the threats of AI to human dignity. But there is also real promise in these tools to save educators time, manage paperwork, personalize instruction, and engage students. This is the question. The real question is, as educators and as a union, will we be able to navigate how AI is used in education, or will it be dictated to us by people outside the profession? Educators must be able to maximize the good and minimize the bad, to use it safely, wisely, and ethically, and to not avoid dealing with the things that are bad about it, including the environmental issues. That's why we first developed, I think I have them here too. We first developed these common sense guardrails. And it's also why we've now launched this National Academy for AI Instruction. Now, we're working, and I am so grateful to the UFT because they're going to house the initial academy. We're working with UFT and Microsoft as leading partners, and with OpenAI and Anthropic. But let's be clear, we don't go into this with blind trust. But when educators aren't in the driver's seat, we've seen what happens. Others, led by the testing industry, turned our schools into testing factories. And you remember the rollout of social media? We can't make the same mistake with AI. So that's why we're building this training facility in New York City that's going to be open to every AFT member, so we can gain the knowledge, the skills, the confidence to use AI responsibly and creatively. Hopefully, the Academy positions educators not just as users of technology, but as leaders in shaping how it's developed and implemented in real classrooms. Because AI should serve our values, support strong instruction, and enhance the work that teachers do, never replace it. And it's clear the Trump administration wants us to have no role in shaping and harnessing this technological train, this change. It's probably a train, too. It's insulting that President Trump signed an executive order saying teachers needed to be trained on AI without involving teachers and while decimating funding for our schools and colleges. They even fought for a 10-year moratorium on any rules of the road or sensible guardrails for AI. We fought that, and we won. So the AI Academy will be where we create a future where technology enhances learning and strengthens the human connection. That human connection that sits at the heart of every great classroom. All of this vision, this is who we are as a union. This is who we are as educators. This is who we are as future makers. Now, I know that many of you are probably thinking, Randi, this all sounds really great. I hope you're thinking it sounds great. But the wolves are at the door. We're facing existential threats. We're in a fight to survive. And that's all true. Because if we don't fight the threats to our freedoms and to our ways of life, these threats will only further encroach on your classroom, your students, and on our profession. But when we fight back, as important as that is, it only gets us back to the place we started. We have to fight for a better life that people feel is authentic and possible, including our members. We're educators. We're used to walking and chewing gum at the same time. And we know our history. The civil rights movement wasn't just about fighting racism and the ravages of Jim Crow. It was about fighting for good jobs, for freedom and opportunity. The progressives of the early 20th century, they weren't just fighting the excesses of the Gilded Age. They were fighting for workers' rights and for safe communities. The New Deal wasn't just about ending the Depression. It was about a new social contract for our nation to have a thriving middle class. Defending democracy and defeating authoritarianism, yes, it requires all of us. And we all have to be engaged. And the AFT is engaged in the courts and the court of public opinion, in the Congress and at the ballot box, on the streets and in our communities, because our future is all on the line. So it may seem like the other side has insurmountable advantages. But think about our founding fathers. Think about the abolitionists. Think about the suffragists. Think about the labor movement. Think about the civil rights movement. The 1963 March on Washington, right here in this city, brought more than 250,000 people from across the country to march for jobs and justice. It changed the trajectory of the civil rights movement. It changed the political environment. It paved the way for massive legislative and social change. And then last year, when the president of South Korea declared martial law, tens of thousands of people took to the streets to protest. It was that massive people powered movement that led the government to rescind martial law, hold its president accountable, and push through democratic reforms. It's clear. I hope it's clear to you. But it's clear. We cannot be silent. We cannot stay at home. This is the moment to stand up, speak up, and show up, to be on the streets together, like the 5 million people who took part in the peaceful No Kings protests, where they said, "We will not stand by when democracy is dismantled," and the Protect Our Kids and Hands Off rallies, and the July 17th Good Trouble teach-ins, and what we will do on Labor Day weekend. Because, to paraphrase scripture, no one can do everything, but we all can do something. Being in the streets is how you beat fear. It's how you show people they are not alone. It's how you convince Congress to act. And if they don't do the right thing, it's how you start the process to elect those who will. To elect leaders who care more about their constituents' needs and aspirations than they fear the bullying and the threats of their party's bosses. This, my friends, my colleagues, this is how we reclaim the promise of America. We are the future makers. So let's imagine that better future and fight like hell to make it a reality. Imagine fully funded public schools and the freedom to provide the learning you know engages and excites your students instead of the straitjacket of standardized tests. Imagine teachers and support staff being paid what they deserve. Imagine an economy that gives every American a path to the middle class and a vibrant life. Imagine a government that cuts taxes for the working class, not for the rich, and that recognizes that health care is a human right. I know each one of us has a vision of a better future that's worth fighting for. We must do it. It takes power to challenge power. Throughout our union, we have collective power. We build and use our power for good, both to fight back and to fight for a better life, for opportunity and dignity for all. That's what public education does. That's what the labor movement does. Building community, caring, fighting, showing up, and voting. Because the people, united, will never be defeated. The people, united, will never be defeated. People, united, will never be defeated. We can say divided or defeated. The people, I want to hear you say it. The people,
united, will never be defeated.
Showing up, making good trouble. And as I close, for those doing the poll, as I close, I again find myself thinking of Martin Luther King, specifically his final book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? We are in a time of trouble and chaos. Fear, anxiety, chaos. Those were familiar feelings to Dr. King. And he asked which path America would take, chaos or community, inequality or opportunity for all. Well, we, the educators of America, the future makers, the freedom lovers, we choose community. We serve and strengthen our communities, and we know that together we can achieve what is impossible to do alone. So none of us asked for this fight, but fight we must for our students, for public education, for our colleges, for our communities, for freedom and democracy, for affordability and opportunity, for dignity, for a better life for all. So, are you ready to fight the chaos and cruelty? Are you ready to fight for our communities, for our profession, for our students? Are you ready to fight for the better future we imagine and know is possible? So, together united as educators and unionists, we'll meet this moment. We will fight for the promise of America, and we will let freedom ring from sea to shining sea. Thank you.